Shashank?
Yes, sir, it is visible now. Yes, sir, it is
Yes.
visible now.
Shall I start from the beginning or shall I move to challenges directly?
Sir, from beginning, please.
Okay, thank you. Great. Why startups in India fail? According to the findings of a survey by the Institute for Business Value and Oxford Economics, almost 90% of India startups fail within the first few years. It is really a big loss and a big problem that must be resolved as soon as possible. All these researches and surveys lead to only one question: why startups in India fail? What do you think? What are the major problems faced by startups in India? There are some of the requirements given below to start startup. So you should have a business plan,
Sir, your
appropriate.
voice is trembling.
Am I
It's
audible
not
now?
clear.
Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, it is audible.
Yes. Appropriate fundings, a location, and build a website. People with some experience and a great business mindset are needed. There are many challenges to the startups in our country. Many startups are facing over a period of their journey of starting a company. And this is the list of around 12 to 14 challenges, major challenges faced by startups in our country. Few of the challenges are overcome because of the introduction of various policies by our government. Although government is supporting and helping startups with different approaches, difficulties and challenges are coming day by day to the startups. If startups overcome those difficulties and challenges, definitely they would start getting success in their business or in their startup. The first and most important challenge is hiring suitable candidates. One of the most important factors of all is in startup is hiring suitable candidates for startup. As all of you are aware, team consists of people with similar interest, determination to do work, and identical focus. In any startup project, ongoing project in the startup, candidate must work from the bottom of his or her interest. Teamwork is a key factor in initiating a startup, and that is needed. That is very, very important while hiring a suitable candidate. And you have to identify whether the candidate is interested or just joining to get the sake of experience of 6 months or 1 year, or he or she is really interested to work with your startup. It is one of the biggest challenges faced by all the startups in this digital age. Selecting a suitable candidate that fits a job well enough is a particular tricky task. Next is increased competition. There is a huge competition around us because of the introduction of the startup, and on the other side, huge requirement to cater the supply chain of the various industries, demand of the supply chain of the various devices in the industry, and digital world is quite fierce around us. There is always a competition going on. Only the best of the best survives in the startup business. In order to thrive in this competitive, the startup needs to play their best cards at the right time and play aggressively in order to survive in this business. Next is cultural and awareness program. Startup need to do deep research on target customer. What are their target customers? What exactly the customer interested in? What are their needs? What are their requirements? You know about your customers. It is the you should be able to survive them, to serve them with the best offering that you will create for them. As you are aware, Indian market it is much diversified. You will get to see many different types of cultures. It is necessary that Before manufacturing and launching your product into the market, understand the needs and wants of your customers, study about their culture, etc. Along with cultural issues, there are social issues, and those issues are associated with guidance and many more. Most of the startups fail just because they do not get proper guidance. They do not get guidance either from the proper person or from mentor. A doctor's son does not need to also become a doctor. He or she can become an entrepreneur. Your family does not have a business background. So people of your family might not be aware of the important things required for setting up a company. In this example, Dr. Sun does not need to also become a doctor. Means if Dr. Sun wants to start his startup, then he must be supported to have a proper consultant or mentor who would guide him to initiate and establish a startup which wherein he is interested in. In other words, they might not be the proper mentor for you, and hence this leads to a lack of quality of mentorship. So here I am talking about the lack of quality of mentorship. So whoever is having the startup, they should identify proper guidance with the help of any mentor or consultant. The next issue is consumer behavior. The Indian market is diverse in nature. I have already mentioned. A lot of different religion following different culture lives in India. A person is facing difficulty to understand their behavior as it changes every 30 to 40 kilometers, and difficult for startups to create marketing strategy for their goods and services. The next one is market structure. So it is very unorganized market structure in our country. Indian market is very large, unorganized and fragmented. It is difficult for startups to launch any goods or provide any service in the country. This is one of the challenges. Market structure. Location is another challenge to the startup. A very important aspect of setting up a startup company. Now I am giving this lecture from a small town, Pilani, northwest region of Rajasthan. It is a remote place. If startup does not get any resources, proper resources in Pilani, then it would become for the startup to survive and start his or her own business. If your startup is digitally based, then you might not face any problem. But if you want to set up any physical or brick and mortar store, then you need to give it thought, because it forms a very important part of your startup. So you have to see the location. If you want to start a physical or brick type of business, then your startup must have that kind of infrastructure with all kind of resources available in that particular city. If your startup is digitally based, then you can sit anywhere in the country and you can work, provided you should get proper internet connectivity as well as electricity connectivity. Next one is human entrepreneurship. In an Indian society, we generally see that females are seen upon as staying at home, cooking for the family members, taking care of their kids, etc. Very meager support to our women community in country. We see very conventional way towards human community. We should encourage women to start their own business if they are willing. We should show them the path and guide them so that we can create more and more women entrepreneurs from our country. Next one is technology. In this 21st century, technology is in huge demand in the business sector. It helps a lot in doing business. Makes the day-to-day activity very easy. Why technology is one of the challenges in our country? because technology plays very important role. It is one kind of intellectual property on which your business or startup depends on. It is a challenge for new startups as they do not have such a large amount of money so that they can invest in research and development and develop the new technology. Sometimes it happens that a person is having a great idea but does not know proper usage of the technology. And Kingfisher, Vijay Malla's example, is the failure of the startup his business because of this. He is having huge amount of investment. However, because of the proper usage of that technology, his Kingfisher airline failed. Initial stage, they do not have money to even hire someone to work for them, which leads to dropping the idea and hence building entrepreneur domain in that space. So one side, if you have money, but you do not have proper usage of that technology. On the other side, you don't have money, but because you don't have money, you cannot hire the technological person for your startup. So these are the technological challenges which startups are facing. Next issue is financing issue. Major issue in setting up a company is associated with finance. Finance is required in every stage without which you cannot start a business. An issue because people do not have that much personal income which they can invest in the business. They go to banks for loans. They either give it at a higher rate of interest or ask for collateral security, which some of the people are not able to fulfill the required criteria. Next issue is sustainability issue. This is very important issue. How? Let us see. It means some issues affect the business in working sustainability. A lack of information provided by the entrepreneurs about the sustainable opportunities which they can undertake to serve the society. They are unaware of the potential they have while setting up the company. These kinds of enterprises do not get much importance when they go for public funding. So sustainability is very important for any startup. Let me give you one example. If startup is having one project and it's delivering, while one project is going on, startup must think and take actions to get in line second project. The moment you are completing and delivering the one project, by the end of that completion, your next project should be on board, so as a complete chain of development keeps going on. At the same time, you are manufacturing the devices under your startup and you are selling it into the market. You have to identify what would be the absolute time for that product. If it's 2 years, you should be capable enough to introduce its next version at the end of second year and initiation of the third year. If it is not happening, any startup cannot able to maintain the sustainability and to survive it as a startup for a longer time. Next issue is regulatory. So it is associated with your legislations and regulations and rules of the governmental policies. A lot of government rules and regulations existing in our regulatory system, which affect startups directly or indirectly. Sometimes it happens that the owner of the startup has to make multiple trips to government offices to get registered or seek any clearance. So this regulatory issue is bigger challenge and difficult in our country. However, my observation is that if startup, the person who is running his startup, instead of making mindset that our government rules and regulations are very tough and babus may not able to move their fight. Since last 1 decade or since last 5 years, our government significantly changed their approach to give these regulatory certificates to the startups. They have updated their rules, they have updated all their regulations, and all the updated information is provided onto the internet. They time to time publish it in newspapers and on televisions. First thing, a regulatory issue is the mindset of the owner of the startup. It should come out of the mindset which the kind of culture and environment we had 1 decade before. Since last decade, regulatory rules and all the procedures changed significantly. So if startup reads all those rules, regulations properly and follow them step by step, then certainly they would definitely get the regulatory certifications in a short amount of time or before the scheduled deadline. These are needed. Why these regulatory certifications are needed? Of uh, because of preventing any kind of misconduct, misuse, and any kind of forgery to the startup as well as to the customer. So to maintain the trust and relationship between startup and the customer as well as the government organizations, so they are playing very important role by monitoring and giving the regulations and regulations to the startup. So one should come out of the mindset that these rules are very difficult and challenging. Instead of that, follow them and get the certification in a very hassle-free manner or in a very smooth manner for the benefit of startup as well as for the benefit of end customer. Sometimes it happens that the owner of the startup has to make multiple trips to the government offices to get registered or seek any clearance. Regulations. Regulations, by comparison, are the ongoing processes of monitoring and enforcing the law. So, not just how the legislation is being enforced, but also the very act of enforcement. Where the confusion comes in is that the regulation is also the name of the document itself that details the act and description of regulation. Legislation and regulations. Legislation is a destination, and regulation is how we get there. Principle of corporate governance for development one should understand very clearly. Legislation and regulations, ensuring the basis for an effective corporate governance framework. These are associated with rights of stakeholders and role of stakeholders in corporate governance. In addition to sets of principles, each company allowed to publish their own set of good corporate governance for their as part of their culture and the teams in their startup. Other issue is associated with taxation. Since the budding startups do not have huge funds with them, they are not able to meet the taxation criteria as they do not earn a huge profit at the initial stage of the business. Hence, it forms a hindrance in the path of setting up a company. So, what government rule or taxation says? If startup company is having, say, let's 1 crore of turnover or 50 lakhs of turnover, then only they will get the taxation benefit. And if it is a startup, they may not have their sale of their products, and they may not able to show in their idea that much amount of turnover every year in the beginning. So such kind of taxation issues few of the startups they are facing during their initial stage. The next important challenge is associated with imperfect education system and conservative lifestyle in our society. So what do you mean by imperfect education system and conservative lifestyle? Indian education is such that they give more knowledge on a theoretical basis but lack to give any practical exposure to our students. This ultimately acts as a hindrance if any student wants to have his startup. I also totally agree with this statement. Yes, our education system is completely based on theoretical knowledge, and very few schools are giving practical exposure to our students. So being a startup company and established in the near future, he can also take a responsibility under CSR program, corporate social responsibility program, to make this awareness in various nearby schools so as they can introduce practical exposure to their students along with the theory as a need of immediate need of the startup. Okay, it would help to improvise our educational system, imperfect education system, as per the need of the startup in our country. They do not get the knowledge of all areas of the business such as sales, marketing, technology, management, finance, accounting, etc. Other is Indian conservative lifestyle. Still, many families in India do not encourage their children, their candidate for doing or setting up a business of their own. They encourage them to simply take a job which can earn them a living and avoid them taking any risk. Women not getting the opportunity to start their business. This is also the result of conservative thinking of Indian society. Although the scenario is changing now in this 21st century, India is still to go a long way.